Where did it all go wrong for Josh Kelly? After such a bright start, why did he unravel so quickly and wind up losing his unbeaten record to David Avanesyan? In my post-fight video, I mentioned the severe cut that Josh Kelly suffered on the back of his head. And according to Eddie Hearn, Josh Kelly said that he did feel weak by the 5th round due to the blood loss. And while that may have been a contributing factor, that certainly wasn't the only reason why Josh Kelly lost this fight. He made mistakes in there. And I'm going to talk about those mistakes in this video, which Josh Kelly, hopefully, in his career moving forward, can address and correct. So the first mistake I want to talk about was the fact that Josh Kelly kept, for the most part, his hands down, even on the inside. Now, in the first couple rounds, Josh Kelly was so much faster than Avanesyan that on the inside, when Avanesyan wanted to throw, Josh Kelly, with his hands down, would spin out of the pocket and Avanesyan was still hitting fresh air. Now, while this looks good and impressive, you need to understand that as a fight progresses, if you haven't got your opponent out of there, you, as in Josh Kelly, are going to start slowing down. And your opponent may not slow down at the same rate that you're slowing down. Therefore, moves that allow you to evade his punches in the early rounds might not work in the later rounds. Now, when Josh Kelly's on the outside, that's his style. He's got his hands down, throwing his shots out there as the taller guy with a longer reach. That's all good. But when you're up close, in mid and close range on the inside, get those hands up. Make it a habit from early on to have your hands up on the inside when you're in Avanesyan's wheelhouse, when you're within his punching range. Get those hands up. So that's the first mistake that I saw Josh Kelly make, was having his hands down on the inside. The second mistake was not enough feints from Josh Kelly, because he came out in the first couple rounds with a real nice jab. It was sharp, it was crisp, it was powerful. It really got Avanesyan's attention. It knocked his head back a couple times. Once you've established the jab like that, you don't need to put so much mustard on it every time you throw it. You don't need to expend so much energy throwing a fast, powerful jab. Because, yeah, some people are going to think it's only a jab. That can't take much out of you. Trust me, it does. When you throw a jab with speed and power, it does take a little bit of energy out of you. And so what you can do is you can feint instead. Because once your opponent has felt the jab and they now respect the jab, you can mess with their mind. Oh, am I going to throw it? Is that jab coming again? You can't see it. It's too fast. So let me just feint it. And this will make your opponent hesitate. This will make your opponent second guess. They're not sure when the jab's coming. They're concerned about it. It's something they've got to factor in to their attack plans. You see? Wasn't enough feints from Josh Kelly. Also, when he did jab, obviously it was a relatively short fight. Only went 6 rounds. And the last couple rounds of the fight, Kelly was really in survival mode. But in the first few rounds of the fight, Kelly could have doubled up his jab a few times. Now, when you double up your jab, you can push your opponent off balance even more so than with one. You can also blind the opponent. If you're hitting him in the nose and the eyes with the double jab, you can blind him. And then the right hand can come off of that. So, would have been nice to see a few double jabs, a few feints, not putting 100% into every jab. Feint the jab sometimes. Fake your opponent out of position. Keep him guessing. There also wasn't any jabs to the body from Josh Kelly. Not that I can remember anyway. And a jab to the body not only can take your opponent's legs away, it can weaken your opponent, particularly if you continuously do it throughout the course of a fight. But when the opponent isn't giving you much to hit upstairs and the body's available, but you don't want to get too close to start throwing hooks to the body, jab him to the body. This is something Mayweather used to do, and he did it very successfully. Go back and look at those Marcus Maidana fights. He was stabbing Maidana's breadbasket, jabbing him to the body. And he was able to push Maidana off balance by doing this. Did it in many fights, actually. That's something Josh Kelly could have done against this type of opponent who's going to come forward all the time. Jab him to the body. Make him take a step back. And collectively, you're investing with those jabs to the body. You're investing in weakening your opponent as the fight goes on. It might not have an immediate effect or a noticeably immediate effect. But trust me, over the course of a 12-round bout, you keep on stabbing that body, the opponent's going to feel it eventually. So that's another thing that I didn't see from Josh Kelly was jabs to the body. Again, not just to weaken Avanesyan, but also to push him off balance. Another thing was not enough clinching. Now, I want to clarify something I said in my post-fight video because some people might have misconstrued it. I said that Josh Kelly did the right thing by pushing Avanesyan back on the inside. Now, I'm not saying that he should have come out from the first round and not boxed on the outside and instead just pushed Avanesyan back and fought kind of an ugly, inside fight. Not at all. Obviously, Josh Kelly's advantages were mainly on the outside with his speed and athleticism and movement. What I'm saying is, in the circumstances he found himself in, where he was weakened, where his legs were not the same anymore, where he wasn't able to move around on the outside after a couple rounds, where that type of pep in his step had left him, in that situation there, he did the right thing by smothering Avanesyan and pushing him back and breaking that forward momentum. He only did it briefly. In one of the rounds, he didn't carry it on. I think he should have carried it on because I'm going to come into this in just a second. You have to learn how to win ugly. You can't win pretty every time. Yeah, you have to learn to go to plan B if plan A ain't working. You have to learn how to win in such a way that isn't your normal style. In terms of the clinching, though, I think he should have incorporated clinching into his game plan of boxing on the outside. So when he got a little bit tired on the outside, and he should have been doing this from early on, because one of the reasons he needs to be doing it from early on is to stop Avanesyan's momentum early in the fight, coming forward, but also to establish it as a tactic. Because if you're moving around and you're fighting a clean fight and there's hardly any clinching, when you start clinching later on in the fight, your opponent takes this as a sign that you're weakening. Oh, he's starting clinching now. He must be getting tired. I've got him, right? But if you start clinching from early on in the fight, and I'm not saying clinching excessively, but tactical clinching. If you start doing it from early on in the fight, how does your opponent know? There are many different signs you can tell that somebody's tired, but it won't be the clinches that are a sign that you're tired. Do you understand what I mean? So he should have employed tactical clinching when he wants to get a rest and also to break Avanesyan's forward momentum. And incorporated in that tactical clinching should have been pushing Avanesyan back, which he did do, as I say, briefly in the fight. And some examples of this would be Miguel Cotto versus Antonio Margarito in their second fight, because in their first fight, of course, Cotto got stopped. In the second fight, Cotto employed tactical clinching, where he was moving around, jabbing, hitting Margarito, but every now and then they would clinch, and Miguel Cotto would use that low center of gravity to push Antonio Margarito back to the ropes, to break that forward momentum. Another example would be Evander Holyfield when he fought Mike Tyson. Same situation. To break Tyson's forward momentum, he would clinch him and walk him back to the ropes. A guy like Mike Tyson is not used to going backwards. Same as David Avanesyan. He's not used to going backwards. Put him in a position that he's not used to. You see? Psychologically, this can help you as well. When a guy who's used to being the bully is now being pushed back all the time, it makes him start questioning himself psychologically. He starts thinking, am I strong enough to beat this guy? He's constantly pushing me back. Josh Kelly, being the bigger man, being the naturally heavier man, when he chose to actually get on the inside and put his body weight on Avanesyan and push him back, he was able to do that. If you look at them on the inside, in the very early rounds, Josh Kelly was also pushing Avanesyan's head down, which is an illegal move. You're not supposed to do that, but it's just emphasizing the point of how strong Josh Kelly is, okay? At least when he's fresh. So I use the examples, Cotto Margarito 2, Tyson Holyfield, even David Haye, who was also trained by Adam Booth at the time. I believe that was their last fight together. David Haye when he fought Derek Chisora. He wasn't just trying to finesse Chisora in that fight or knock Chisora out. He fought a technical fight, David Haye, where up close when they did clinch, David Haye was walking Derek Chisora back to the ropes. Now, I'm not sure how much of that was Adam Booth's doing in terms of employing that as a strategy, or how much David Haye decided to, come up with that strategy himself. Because I know David Haye knows a lot of MMA guys and he's friendly with people down at London Shoot Fighters and whatnot. And he has done a bit of, sparring, wrestling and MMA training with those guys. So I'm not sure if that was something David Haye came up with or Adam Booth. But either way, it worked well in the Chisora fight for breaking Chisora's forward momentum. When they get in the clinches, David Haye had worked on this. He'd said before the fight, he'd worked on pushing Chisora back in the clinches. Again, a la Holyfield Tyson. Now, apart from the tactical element, mentally, you have to be ready, as I said earlier, to win ugly. You're not going to be able to win pretty every time. Josh Kelly calls himself pretty boy. Well, sometimes you've got to get ugly. Examples of fighters who had to win ugly, who had to go to plan B when plan A wasn't working, when there was some type of crisis. They managed to win ugly by any means necessary. The great fighters, the best fighters, they find a way to win against adversity. Tyson Fury, when he fought Steve Cunningham, he came out boxing Steve Cunningham, fighting his usual long-range fight. Steve Cunningham catches him with a big right hand. Heavy knockdown for Tyson Fury. He gets up off the canvas and he decides, you know what? I can't give Steve Cunningham enough time and space to get shots like that off. I've got to close him down. And in closing him down, I can't have my left hand down like I normally do. I've got to get both hands up. So Tyson Fury completely switched his game plan on the fly in that fight and decided it was best to just put his hands up, close the distance as quickly as possible and fight a big man fight. When he got on the inside, just lean on Steve Cunningham, bully him, and make the fight about size. Don't make it a technical fight. So that was an example of Tyson Fury winning ugly, going to plan B, worrying about looking pretty next time. By any means necessary, like Malcolm X, win the fight. And that's what Tyson Fury did against Cunningham. He also did it against Otto Wallin. Not as much of a dramatic moment in the fight. Obviously didn't get dropped, but he did get a bad cut. And again, Tyson Fury found a way to win. He won the fight ugly. And another example would be one of Josh Kelly's rivals, Conor Benn. Conor Benn has been in crisis situations in his career. He's shown the heart of his dad in coming through those crisis situations, and he's had to win ugly several times. That's what it takes in professional boxing. You're not going to always be able to look nice, neat and tidy and athletically gifted and all this kind of stuff. No, it's not like the amateurs where it's only 3 rounds and you might be able to look pretty for 3 rounds. In the professional game, the further you go up in competition, the tougher it's going to get. And it's not just tough in terms of, stamina, getting hit with shots. You've got to be able to take one. It's mentally tough dealing with all the pressure. But the roughness of professional boxing. Yeah, Josh Kelly got a cut on the back of his head. Now, the back of your head is not a legitimate target. I believe it was an elbow that caused it. I'm not saying it was deliberate by Avanesyan. But the point I'm making is because professional boxing is rough and tumble, stuff like that is going to happen. You're going to get strange cuts in weird places. And you're going to have to be mentally strong enough to suck it up and push through. Josh Kelly, as far as I can see, kind of panicked a bit. And look, I'm not dismissing the fact that the blood loss would have affected him physically. But I've seen fighters lose a lot of blood and they're not affected in the same way. So you have to train yourself psychologically to be able to deal with stuff like that, if that's even possible for Josh Kelly. But you have to get it into your head. This is a rough and tumble business. You're not going to be able to look pretty every time. You have to be able to bite down on your gum shield by any means necessary and win a fight. Even if you've got to go from the fancy Dan moving around, jabbing, looking crisp and sharp and nice smooth moves, you got to be able to go from that to fighting in the trenches where you're not making it hardly any smooth moves at all, if need be. Where you're just biting down on the gum shield, pushing your opponent back, just winning ugly. So that's another thing that Josh Kelly needs to address is, I guess, his mindset. Because he is somebody that's in love with his athleticism. But I was really looking for Josh Kelly, as I said in my pre-fight video, to fight more of a technical fight rather than an athletic fight. And I go back to Hay when he fought Chisora, because again, Hay fought more of a technical fight in that fight than an athletic fight. Yeah, he was throwing fast shots on the outside and jabbing Chisora and all that, but he was strategic about what he was doing. Walking Chisora onto certain shots, and as I say, in the clinches, walking Chisora back to the ropes. You see, his mind was more on the technical aspects, the strategic aspects, rather than just being much more athletically gifted than the guy. But that's the kind of attitude I saw in the first couple rounds from Kelly, is again, he's in love with his athleticism. The fact that he's faster and more athletic than most of his opponents, it makes him feel good to be able to move at that speed. The endorphins are flowing in his brain when he's moving around at that kind of speed and throwing the shots and, picking up that nice left hook that he hit Avanesyan with. I believe that was the second round, and that was right before the cut. I think the cut happened after Josh Kelly hit Avanesyan with a big left hook, jumped on him, tried to get him out of there. Avanesyan managed to weather the storm, and then in some type of clinch, an elbow went in, and Josh Kelly was caught in the back of the head again. I'm not saying it was intentional. But yeah, Josh Kelly loves that athleticism that he has, but that's not always going to be enough. And he discovered that in this fight. So I would have preferred him to go in there with a more technical mindset rather than an athletic mindset, a strategic mindset of, I'm going to move around, hit the guy with fast shots here and there, a lot more feints. It's called maturity, the stuff that comes when you become a veteran in the game. You can feint a guy out of position. You don't have to throw the jab every time. On the inside, I'm going to wrap you up and I'm going to push you back. I'm going to break that forward momentum. Now, can Josh Kelly come back? That's the big question here. Another question would be, should he fire Adam Booth? Because when fighters lose, particularly for the first time, that's something that a lot of the fans are saying. Oh, he needs to fire his trainer. I've already seen a lot of people say that Adam Booth is massively overrated. Well, Adam Booth teaches a particular style. He likes athletically gifted fighters, and Josh Kelly is that. Maybe Josh Kelly does need a more technical trainer. Not that Adam Booth isn't technical, but he's not the most technical guy. He's very strategic, Adam Booth, and he's very good normally when it comes to the psychological aspects of boxing. Although here, Kelly was definitely lacking in that department. So, I mean, if you could imagine Josh Kelly, I'm not saying he should go and join this guy, but I'm just giving you an example. If you can imagine Josh Kelly with somebody like Virgil Hunter. See, Virgil Hunter understands the things I've been talking about. Wrapping a guy up, pushing him back, breaking his forward momentum, using feints, fighting a technical fight rather than an athletic fight. Your athleticism is always there. The hand speed is always there when you need it, when it's appropriate to use. But just like Virgil Hunter did for Amir Khan, where he took him from a guy who was just throwing his hands in combinations from the first minute of the first round, showing his hand speed immediately. He took him from that to the Amir Khan that beat Devin Alexander, to the Amir Khan who beat Louis Collazo, who was more conservative, who wasn't so much in love with his athleticism, who was fighting more strategically, more cleverly. You see? So if Josh Kelly was with a guy like that, who instilled more of a technical mindset rather than an athletic mindset, it will probably help him. With that being said, I'm not saying Adam Booth can't do that. At the end of the day, Adam Booth, when he was with David Hay, he saw David Hay under his watch lose to Carl Thompson. And in fact, there's a lot of parallels between what happened to David Hay in the Thompson fight and what happened to Josh Kelly here against Avanesyan. Similar kind of fights where David Hay came out fast against Carl Thompson, made a good start, but then faded quite quickly and unraveled. Same thing for Josh Kelly. Now, there may have been slightly different reasons, and of course, David Hay has different attributes to Josh Kelly, vice versa, but the common denominator in both situations was Adam Booth. Adam Booth worked with David Haye to improve in certain areas, to fix the mistakes that David Haye made against Thompson moving forward. We never saw David Haye gas out to the extent that he did against Carl Thompson and just totally unravel in a fight. Even against Vladimir Klitschko, where he lost and talked about his toe, he managed to hold it together for the 12 rounds and go the distance. Didn't even get dropped in that fight. The David Haye pre-Thompson would never have been able to go the distance with Vladimir Klitschko. So Adam Booth must have had some type of input in improving David Haye, right? Must have had some type of input in the strategy that David Haye employed for several fights. Jean-Marc Mormec, for example. Derek Chisora, of course. Even Fragamini. That was a tough fight for David Haye, where he got cut. He was in a crisis, came through. So there's certainly a lot of conversations that need to be had between Adam Booth and Josh Kelly. I wouldn't necessarily say that Kelly needs to get rid of him right away. I would say, see what Adam Booth says. Listen to what improvements he thinks that Josh Kelly needs to make. If all Adam Booth is saying is, it was unlucky, you got a cut on the back of the head, and that drained you, that's not good enough. Because there were other things, and again, yes, the cut on the back of the head, I'm sure, did drain him, but there are fighters who would have suffered an injury like that and still held it together and still won the fight. Perhaps they would have had to have won the fight ugly, but they would have done it. They would have found some way to win. Josh Kelly didn't. Now, some people are going to say, well, it proves what many were saying before the fight, that it was too early for Josh Kelly. Even Conor Benn was saying that's too early for him. Ultimately, it was. The mental, the psychological, the emotional maturity in a boxing context just wasn't there. The tactical acumen just wasn't there. So anyway, that's just my take on it. Improvements I think Josh Kelly needs to make based on the mistakes I saw him make there in the fight with Avanesyan. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm out. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.